Guys, it's Jen. This is another episode of Reframing Me, and I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Brubaker. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here today. I have a really special episode planned for us. If you have been here for a while, you know that this podcast is about self-discovery. It's about parenting and navigating relationships. But today we are going even deeper. In fact, I have the feeling that we are actually launching something really big here, bigger than this episode and even bigger than this series of episodes that I have planned for us. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. That was Picasso. And as a quote, practical business major who I realized that I would end up getting a master's and a PhD, I would have definitely instead been an art history major. But I will say that Picasso definitely found his gift and totally shared it with the world. I wanted to go and find a prompt to start this episode, or I guess this series with. And so I went through all of my little lists and my notes, and really probably 80% of them, 80%, I was a business major, but probably 80% of them would fit because nearly everything that seems to resonate with me fits a pattern. So I could have closed my eyes and put my finger on any one of them and it would have worked. So I decided on this one. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Because really, isn't that what we're all hoping for? What we're all hoping to find? To reach our 80s or our 90s, 100 years old, and be able to say, I found my gift and I shared it with others. When people say that they are looking for meaning in their life, they want to find their life's purpose. That's what it really is, right? We all have so many gifts, so many things within ourselves that define who we are, the things that make us us. But it's the process of uncovering those that is really very hard. It's messy. Digging through the layers of ourselves and the roles that we play and the narratives that we have created and tell ourselves. So sometimes it's just easier to not keep looking. But that's when we feel unfulfilled. Yes, it's easier, but easy isn't always better. And then if or when we do find that gift, well, that's only the beginning, because the giving it away part, that can be just as scary. Any of you who have done self-development work know that there are lots of growing pains in personal growth. Just like your kids' legs would randomly hurt. Yeah, they wanted to get taller. They wanted that growth. But did it have to come with their legs hurting? It did. And it's the same for us. We may want to grow in our lives or our relationships or our careers, but the process of getting there, that process of discovering that purpose, it can be painful. And then the sharing of that purpose or that gift, it can totally be out of your comfort zone. The imposter syndrome that we feel when we're stretching ourselves beyond what we think we know, beyond the boundaries that we had previously set for ourselves and the narratives that we've wrapped ourselves up in, it can be a lot. This self-discovery process for me, it has been about a 5-year project. I can't say exactly when it started, but I would definitely place it in COVID. So 4 to 5 years. The first couple or few were that discovering my purpose stage, and it was definitely challenging, and it was even painful at times. It was like all of that puzzling that we were doing back then, I guess, putting the pieces together, bits and pieces would come to me, and it would lead me just a little bit closer, give me another piece or section of the puzzle complete. I mean, I still don't have it completely finished yet, but it's definitely starting to take shape. And the sharing then of that purpose, well, that's when the imposter syndrome kicked in. Who am I to tell people these things? Who am I to give other people advice? Who am I to try to help them navigate their relationships? I mean, in hindsight, I, of course, realize how ridiculous those statements all were, right? I mean, I am not just some random person talking here. I am a literal expert. But that imposter syndrome to all of us is so real. And it's really hard to combat. So I pushed through some of my barriers and I definitely got out of my comfort zone, but I still wrap myself up in the limiting beliefs and I created the narratives. Like, I can't tell you how to make your relationships better, but I can help you to understand why things are the way they are, or some version of that I know I said so many times in these episodes. Kind of like how for 20 years of studying and teaching political communication, my mantra was always, I'm not here to teach you my politics, but I'm here to teach you about politics. And while that narrative sounds all noble, and it was, it still is a limiting belief of sorts. And maybe because I know that underneath that desire to remain apolitical, I'm only here to teach it to you, but underneath all of that, I knew there was a girl who felt uncomfortable sharing her own opinions because she was a people pleaser. She wanted everyone to like her. And committing to a stance or to a position was going to be off-putting to some. And she just couldn't handle that. So cloaking herself in that noble narrative was better. And, when I taught political comm in the classroom, it was the right way to approach it. But those days are far behind me. And the reality is, whether it's in political comm or here in family comm, I am a literal expert and I am 100% qualified to guide others to making their lives better, to making their relationships better. And I have come to realize that my purpose, or at least part of my purpose is to help others find their purpose. And yes, it took 5 years for me to reach the point of both realizing that and feeling comfortable and confident in it. So that is what I have planned for us to have our conversation about today and our conversations about this month. Remember back in Zentober? If y'all are OGs, you will remember that. You will also maybe remember how meekly and how self-deprecating I would say, it like, Zentober, I'm so sorry. I keep trying to push that on you. I'm sorry. I keep trying to give you prompts and a plan to follow and to find Zen before you move into the chaos of November and December. I know it's silly. I'm silly, but just go with me, placate me. That's how I kept saying it. And I think back and it's like, why was I so afraid to say, y'all, trust? This is good stuff. I know what I'm doing. I'm helping. I'll be better at the end of it. You'll be better at the end of this. We'll all be prepared to move into the holidays. Zen is good. Zentober, it's cute. Let's do this and enjoy it. But I didn't do that. It was such evident imposter syndrome. So today we are having a conversation about the official launch of March Matrenaissance. It's a movement, a mindset shift. It's a transformation that I believe every woman in midlife needs to hear. So yes, I created the term Matrenaissance. It combines matra, meaning mother, and renaissance, meaning rebirth. Now, before you think, oh, this is just about motherhood, it's another motherhood thing, let me tell you, it is not. No, this is about every woman who has given of herself, who has poured herself into others day after day, selflessly for years. Yes, mostly to her children, but to her career, to her partner, to her relationships, to her parents, to her responsibilities. Pour herself into those things selflessly, only to wake up one day and think, where did I go? Who am I now? What happened to her? This is the thing that has been somewhere in the back of my mind that I have been trying to nail down and put words to for the last number of years. Like how when you wake up from a dream and you're trying to explain it and you know it's there, right? But you can't actually say it or explain it. But somehow it's there to you and you know it was there and you know it was great, but you can't even begin to articulate it. It's like just beyond the boundaries of your mind. And that's exactly how I would say that this has been for me. And probably how the process of finding life's meaning and life's purpose is to so many people. We have been conditioned as women to believe that our life is like a roller coaster. It's like the hill that we are slowly climbing and climbing up that hill. And as we go up it, life just keeps getting better and better. And then we hit the peak. We look around us and life is just amazing up here. It's beautiful. But then, faster than we would ever have thought possible, it's just a steep decline. And midlife, well, midlife is just that top beginning part of the hill, the beginning of the end. The fun part, it's over. The excitement is gone. The anticipation of that beauty that's to come, nope, that's over too. I had an aunt who she used to say something along the lines of that she served no purpose anymore. Her kids were grown and she wasn't going to cure cancer. So really, what's the point? And she was probably, I would think, around my age when she would say that. And let's be honest, as our own kids have gotten older, many of us have had similar thoughts, at least at some point. I know I sure have. I hear of women all the time who say that, like, as they near 50 or turn 50 or in their 40s, it's like they became invisible. They don't matter anymore. Society doesn't see their value. But the worst part is that they don't see their value. We all know that the teen years, they can be pretty isolating for moms to begin with. They're exhausting. Many of us have been in our careers now for 20 or 30 years. Or for others, their career has been being a mom, and now they're being forced into retirement. And the buyout package is only less laundry and fewer groceries to buy. And then there's perimenopause, menopause. And as gross as I feel like the olden-timey term, the change, as gross as that is, there's a reason it was called that. Literally everything changes. Your body, your mind, your relationships, everything. And although about 50% of the population experiences menopause, it is completely under-researched. And doctors, they are totally undertrained in it. And until recently, no one really talked about it. So we as a product are totally unprepared for it. Yes, we're unprepared for the physical elements, but also we're so unprepared for the emotional and the mental and the relational impacts of this point in time. If you're one of the lucky ones, like I was, you're content. You look around and you're like, yeah, this is good. But even in that lucky one scenario, there's still but is this it? Is this then what it's just going to be for like the next 30, 40, 50 years? Or maybe you're less lucky and maybe you look around and you think, gosh, I really thought there was going to be more. I thought it would be better. I thought I would be better. I thought that I would be more. Matrenaissance is about realizing that midlife isn't the end of anything. It's actually just the beginning of something bigger and better. But most of us, we have been conditioned to believe that this stage of life, it means decline. It means that we start to fade into the background, that we become less visible and less desirable and less relevant. and that we should just accept that our best years are behind us. But what if that wasn't true? What if midlife is actually the start of the most powerful chapter of our lives? What if this is the part where we finally step into that fullest, truest version of ourselves? The time when we get to start all over. We get to decide who we want to be, just like when we were teenagers or 20 somethings. But this time we know so much more. That is what Matrenaissance is about. And I know that this is true. I know that this can happen. I know that you can do it because I have done it. I have lived it. I didn't wake up one day and decide to reinvent myself. It wasn't something that I had planned. It started with a disruption, is what I call it. It started with a shift. It was a feeling that I just couldn't ignore anymore. And for me, that moment came when I looked at my life. My kids were amazing. They were everything that I had ever hoped that they would be. But it was about, like I said, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. So they would have been 14 and 12 and 11. And so I looked at them and they were growing up. But my career was steady. My marriage was good. My house, my life, it was all good. Everything was fine. So everything should have been fine. I was content. I should have been content. And yet, deep inside, something just kind of felt off. And I remember distinctly, I can remember sitting in my car and crying because I had the thought that I've peaked. This is it. It's all downhill from here. And let me tell you, if you haven't had it, and I'm sure that many of you can attest to having those thoughts yourself, but that was a terrifying thought. Because if I had already hit my peak, then what was I supposed to do with the rest of my life? Just exist? Just coast through? Watching my kids grow up and my kids leave, seeing my body change, my sense of purpose just fall away, and feel like I was becoming a supporting character in my own life. Yes, I guess just become invisible. But I didn't want to feel that way. I didn't know what to do about it though, so I did what a lot of us do when we come to something overwhelming. I tried to push it down. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I should just be grateful for what I had. But the thing about those kind of feelings is that they don't go away. They sit there waiting for the time when we come to finally face them. So for me, it was meditation. Meditation was my entry point. Every day, no matter what, I would start my day off with the meditation. Now, it did not come naturally for me. I have one of those minds that has no desire to ever shut off. I'm one of those people that I had no idea until like TikTok taught me or whatever, but I had no idea that everyone doesn't have a constant narrator in their heads. I didn't know that some people could just like exist in peace without a running commentary of about 5 different subjects all at once. If you were to look at the browser on my phone or my laptop at any moment, I can guarantee you that there will be like a zillion open tabs. And that is a very fair representation of the inside of my head. But in addition to that, I am nothing if not disciplined. And if I say I'm going to meditate every morning, then I am going to meditate. And I did. And eventually, I don't know when, but eventually it started to change. It changed me. It calmed me. It calmed my mind and it brought me peace and clarity. It allowed me to start seeing things that I had been missing in all of the chaos of my head. I started journaling. Before that, my journaling really struggled to move beyond, Dear Diary, it's me, Jen. Which when I say that out loud, it sounds disturbingly like how I start every podcast episode. Well, we are going to put a pin in that for right now because it's probably one that I should explore just for a bit. Well, I went from riding my Peloton to being a Peloton aficionado, and not just for the workouts. I started doing those meditations and I started listening to the workouts for the words of encouragement and for motivation. It wasn't just a physical workout for me. For me, the workouts were also about emotional growth. The meditations and the journaling that then came from it were about spiritual growth. And eventually, at some point, I just stopped resisting. I started asking myself different questions. Instead of saying, what's left for me? I started asking, what do I want for myself? Just like I have posed to you a few times in Jenna Zens, the question, what would I be? Who would I be if I was truly free? Because that is how I started to see this new stage of my life. I began to see it as an opportunity for me to be who I would be if I was free. If I was free of those false narratives that I carried around. If I was free of the lies that I told myself, the limiting beliefs that I had acquired along the way. If I was free of others' expectations of me. If I was free of societal constraints, free of my doubts, free of my fear of failure, and free of my fear of success. And that question, that one question, it changed everything for me. I started to then dive deep into self-reflection and self-development. And I started reading things. I started journaling more. I listened to podcasts. I found myself drawn to spirituality in a way that I hadn't been before. I learned about the law of attraction and about manifestation. And I learned that I was in charge of my future and I could make it what I wanted it to be. And most importantly, I started paying attention to the way that I was talking to myself, the story that I had been telling myself about this point in my life, about the point that was coming, that was looming ahead. And I realized something. I had been believing a narrative that wasn't even mine, and it definitely wasn't true. Society had fed me this idea that midlife was something to survive, something to endure, something that meant I was losing value. But that was a lie. And the moment that I started to question that belief is when I began rewriting my story. And that's when things really started to change, because once you shift your mindset, the next step then is action. And for me, that action looked like redefining my purpose, realizing that I have so much knowledge to offer, this knowledge that can help other women who are just like me, help them to make their families function better, help them to make their relationships within their families stronger, to understand what is going on, what is the biggest picture, and make them feel more fulfilled in their own place in the world because they are acting in line with their souls. True happiness comes when we are aligned with our purpose. And my purpose was to break the tradition of holding women back. The perpetuation of the lie that they need to stay in roles that no longer serve them and that they are finished growing. And so I started this podcast. Y'all know I started this almost like an extension of my journal. I wasn't sure where I was going with it. And I was 12 episodes in before I even told anyone about its existence. But I knew that I wasn't the only one who was feeling the way that I was. And I knew that I wasn't the only one who felt alone and felt like she was struggling with what I was doing and where I was headed. And I wanted to share what I knew and what I was learning to help these women in their journeys too. And now, over these past 2.5 years of podcasting, I have realized that women all around me, all around the world, women are feeling the same things. They just don't have the words for it yet. And eventually, I have come to realize that it wasn't just about me. It wasn't just my story. This was a universal experience. And how could there be a literal universal experience that no one seems to be talking about? Because I know how lonely it can be to feel like you're the only one struggling with something that seems to come so organically to others. And so I wanted every other woman to know that even if it feels like you're alone, you're not. Our advocacy is often rooted in our own personal struggles. And that's when I realized that I had to create a framework, a model that could help women understand what was happening to them and how to move forward. I want to empower women to reach a place in their lives where their roles and their relationships are in line with their soul so that they can be happier, so that they can then make their families function better. They can make the relationships within their families stronger, and it can make them feel more fulfilled with their own place in the world. And so, yeah, that I guess was my Matrenaissance. Or maybe it was the beginning of my Matrenaissance. Realizing that, yes, my kids are growing up. They don't need me like they used to. But this transition, it was more than was sold to me as empty nest syndrome. The way that my body has been changing is more than is sold to me as perimenopause. It is a complex, multifaceted process that involves identity shifts and emotional adjustments, relationship changes, and physical changes. During this time, women often face questions like that one: who am I beyond being a mother? Or how do I reconnect with myself and my purpose? This phase, this part of our life involves both loss and opportunity, but we have a tendency to only see the loss portion. A letting go of the hands-on parenting role and opening up to rediscover our passions, to redefine our relationships, and to reclaim our personal space. And of course, that's where my ideas for the Matrenaissance identity theory of communication began. From these moments of feeling lost or feeling disconnected, that's when I unknowingly began my Matrenaissance. And as I went through my own transformation is when I realized that this wasn't something that only I was experiencing. And being the researcher that I am, I, of course, started digging into the why. Why is this happening? What are the patterns? And so, yeah, that's when I started developing the Matrenaissance idea. And yeah, that's when I started developing the Matrenaissance theory of, and yeah, that's when I started developing the Matrenaissance identity theory of communication. Because at its core, the theory explains how women in midlife. And yeah, that's when I started developing the Matrenaissance identity theory of communication. At its core, this theory explains how women in midlife navigate this profound identity transformation through communication, both within themselves and with the people around them. Basically, it can break down into three factors, three things, three forces. Oh my gosh. Basically, it can break down into three key factors that shape our identity, especially our identity at this stage of life. There's the intrapersonal communication, the interpersonal communication, and those cultural narratives. And so the first one, and probably the most powerful one, at least in our process, is the intrapersonal communication, the conversations that we have with ourselves, our thoughts, our beliefs, the internal narrative that shapes how we see ourselves and how we see our place in the world. And this is where so many of us get stuck. Because by midlife, we've been conditioned by decades of messaging about aging, our roles, about what it means to be a good mother or wife or daughter or professional. And often we internalize those beliefs and they don't align with who we are now becoming because we don't yet realize who we are now becoming. Think about it. How often do you hear yourself saying things like, I'm too old to start over, or I shouldn't want more, or this is just how life is now? Those aren't your thoughts. Those are stories that you have absorbed from culture or family or society's expectations. And then the second force that shapes our transformation is our interpersonal communication. So how we navigate our relationships as our identity begins to shift. Because when we change, the dynamics in our relationships must also change. And that can be scary for us and totally scary for the people around us. We talk over and over on this podcast about how our family is a system and how what impacts one impacts everyone else and makes the whole system shift. And at this point, our kids are changing. Our teens are growing up and they are shifting, which is causing our entire system to shift as well. And then when we start to change too, the dynamics are going to change even more. And maybe you've started setting boundaries that you never set before. Or maybe you've started questioning certain relationships, certain friendships, or redefining what it is that you need from your partner or what you expect from your children. Maybe your role as a mother is shifting now because your kids are becoming more independent. All of these moments, they are all who we are and they affect how we communicate and they must all evolve. That's part of the transformation. And it can be a challenging and it can be a bit painful part of the transformation because not everyone is going to be on board with this. Some relationships are going to grow stronger. Others might fade. But what matters the most is that you are showing up as your authentic self, as truly who you are, not who you used to be. And third, it's probably one of the harder ones to fight, the cultural narratives. Society tells us that midlife is a crisis, that women lose their value as they age, that we should fight the aging process, that we should stay small, that we should be content with what we have. But those narratives are outdated and they are harmful. Maybe when the life expectancy was like 50, right? But now we have another whole portion of our lives to leave. But those narratives are outdated and they are harmful. They keep us stuck in roles that no longer fit us. Matrenaissance is about reframing. It's about reframing midlife, not as something to fear, but as something to be excited about, something to embrace, because this is the moment where you finally have the wisdom and the experience and the freedom to become exactly who you were always meant to be. So now, here I am, 5 years later in the process, and I wake up every day feeling excited. I feel renewed in my purpose. I don't feel invisible. I don't feel a dread at what is to come. I don't feel like I've peaked. I know that deep in my soul that my best, my most fulfilling years, they are still ahead of me. And the best part, I know that I am not alone in all of this. There are thousands or millions of women who wake up to this same realization every day. And that is why I created this model. It's not just a personal journey, but it's a structured framework for transformation, because it's not just about understanding Matrenaissance. It's about learning how to live it. Because midlife isn't the end of my story or your story. It's where you finally become who you were meant to be. If you are sitting there right now listening and you feel like you've been feeling stuck or unseen or lost, please know that you are not. You are not alone and you are not unseen. You may feel a bit lost, but you're just finding your new way. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are just starting your Matrenaissance. And you do not have to go through this alone. So that's what March Matrenaissance is. I wanted to share my Matrenaissance story with you to start it off. But this month, we're going to have a few conversations with other women. They are women who I know personally, just like in my everyday life. Women who are just like you. Women who have walked this journey, who have gone through their own Matrenaissance, and they have come out on the other side transformed in different ways. I do want you, though, to be part of this conversation. So if this episode resonated with you, if you are sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is me, that makes my heart so happy. Please send me a message. Let's talk about it, because this is just the beginning. It's your beginning. And I want you to look at it with that excitement, because midlife isn't the end of your story. It's where you finally become who you were meant to be. Thank you so much for listening today and always. If you have enjoyed the show, if this has resonated with you, or if you think someone else will benefit from it, please share it with your friends. That's how we'll grow our community. Find me on socials. It's Reframing Me everywhere. And until next time, be well and communicate.